New Zealand, when I was there, was divided into two missions. They had the Auckland, New Zealand mission and the Wellington mission. Now it's divided into three. There's a Hamilton mission, and I don't know a lot about that because I wasn't there when that happened. But the church has been there for a long time. The Hamilton Temple was built, I believe, it was the 11th. It was either the 7th or the 11th temple built in the world. I can never remember. It's the same design as Switzerland, and it's the other, whichever one. Well, Hamilton isn't, is the one that Switzerland is. And it was built entirely by volunteer labor, by the members of the church. They provided the funding, they provided a lot of the resources and the labor to get it done. And so it was built very similarly to, the Salt Lake Temple and all the other earlier temples. It wasn't done by professionals typically. The church at one point was a lot larger than it is now. There was a time where several of the Maori chieftains met together and they had a prophecy because missionaries, not of our church, but other churches, started to come over preaching Christianity. And they met, and one of them told them that they would know when the true church had arrived because the missionaries would come wearing white shirts and they would go 2 by 2. And when missionaries originally came, most of the Maori population in New Zealand joined the church very quickly as a result of that meeting. And since then, people have kind of lost touch with a lot of the Maori culture and don't know about those types of events. And so a lot of, let's just say there's a lot of less active members of the church or descendants of less active members or descendant of members. Most people there, though, know about the church as a result of that. Because there was a really strong influence for a while of the church over there. That's how they got a temple so early. And so the mission populations, though, are quite different. The Auckland mission has about 3 million people living inside of it, and the Wellington mission has about 1 million, 1.5 million tops, because of the way the populations are spread out. Auckland is the biggest city in New Zealand and has about 3/4 of the population of the country living in and around that area. And so most of the areas that we served in were pretty small. There was about 112 to 126 missionaries, depending on how many my mission president could get or not get. He wanted to cut us down to about 100 missionaries was his ideal. He never got there, but we stayed between 112 to 126 typically. And aside from two cities in particular, there's on the South Island, there's a city called Christchurch, which had 3 or 4 sets of missionaries in it, and in the Wellington area, which has a whole zone around there, so probably 6 to 8 sets of missionaries or more, maybe as many as 12. I can't remember at the time. Most of the areas were pretty far apart. So I served, my first area was in Christchurch around all these other missionaries, and then I went to the very southernmost city in New Zealand and was in a branch of about 40 people on a good day, and was 45 minutes drive away from the closest set of missionaries, who were an hour and a half drive away from the next closest set of missionaries. And that wasn't typically, terribly uncommon. There was certain sets of missionaries who were as far as 2.5 hours away driving, which isn't as big as in the other missions, but for us it was kind of a big deal. It was pretty far away. The smallest branch I ever served in had about 7 people that attended it, including us as missionaries. On an average day, we might get as many as 12. You might have probably as little as 5, but typically no less than that. And my biggest, we had 125 people attending. I think the biggest wards that were in the mission had about 200, 250, but I never served in one of those. We had, I think, 6 or 7 zones, depending on how long in my mission you look at, because there were certain times where we dissolved zones and combined them with other ones, other times where they recreated them, just because of the number of missionaries that would fluctuate. But we did a lot of door knocking, a lot of finding, because there just weren't a lot of members in a lot of places to help us. They just weren't used to having missionaries there a lot of times, or they weren't used to having to help. We had to train them in that quite a bit. And I served in a lot of the smaller, more outlying areas in my mission, and so spent a lot of time trying to find people to teach.